Next, we continue to use the 3D hairbrush to style the hair. First, it's necessary to enable children for the hair, where it's recommended to use the interpolated type. Then, assign a vertex group to specify the growth area of the hair. After that, adjust the thickness of the hair. Real hair is usually thinner, so reduce the hair thickness. When adjusting the thickness, you can observe the hair from a close distance to better determine its thickness. Once the hair thickness is adjusted, set the number of hairs. Next, you can start styling the hair. Starting from the clumps is a good entry point. You can achieve the clumping effect with a clump modifier. When using the clump modifier, be aware that the styling of hair on the top and sides of the head is different. So create two separate vertex groups accordingly, allowing independent control over the top and sides of the hair, enhancing controllability. To better control the painting weights, you can display the hair, which will more clearly differentiate the hair areas on the top and sides. If there is too much hair, the painting weights may lag, so you can turn off the children. You can also increase the hair radius to more conveniently observe the hair area. After setting the hair, you can start painting weights. When dealing with top hair, you can first mark out the top area to facilitate adjustment. Without marking, it may result in inaccurately defined areas, such as being overly broad or narrow. Therefore, marking areas is crucial. After handling the basic area of weights, you need to smooth the transition areas of the weights. If the transition areas are not handled well, the blending between the two hair regions will appear harsh. To make the transition more natural, you can use the blur brush to smooth the edge transitions. Next, assign the corresponding hair weights to the modifier added earlier. The first modifier can be used for top hair, then add another clump modifier for the hair on both sides. When you are styling the hair on the sides, if the number of clumps is too small, you can add some clumps. Too few hair clumps can make the styling appear rough and simplistic, while an adequate increase in hair clumps can make the styling more refined. Especially for short hair areas like the sides, a greater number of clumps is needed to enhance the visual effect. After adjusting the side clumps, you can adjust the styling of the top hair clumps. The effect of top hair clumps can be divided into front and rear parts, enriching the effect of the hair clumps. The default effect of the front top hair is good, but the rear hair may need a reduced number of clumps to create a distinction between the front and rear, making the overall styling more varied and enriched. Then create the top front clumps. The default clump effect is fine, no further adjustment needed. After adjusting the front clumps, take a look at the rear clumps. The rear hair clumps are still a bit few. You can increase some more. Then take a look at the clump styling of both the front and rear of the top. The effect seems fine. To make the hair segments smoother, you can add a resample modifier, switching the mode to evaluated. Evaluated will automatically resample the hair segments based on the parameters in the modifier below it. After adding the resample modifier, the hair will become smoother. Then adjust the top clumps. To make the clumps more random, you can enable the randomization of the hair. After adjusting the front and rear top hair clumps, the next step is to differentiate the front and rear hair clumps through weights. We can display only the hair guides. Duplicate a weight to control the rear top clumps, and with the guides as reference, the painting area will be more precise. Now after that, assign the corresponding vertex group to the clump modifier. The rear top clump modifier can be assigned with the vertex group just painted, so it only affects the rear clumps. The front top clump modifier retains the vertex group that controls influence. You can assign the just painted vertex group to clump, then invert the vertex group. This way, you can control only the front top clumps. Next, you can further adjust the styling of the rear hair. The current hair clumping strength might be uniform, making the overall effect lack variation. To make the styling more random, you can enable the randomization for clumps, making the strength of clumps present different variations. To better observe the effect, you can add a length modifier, allowing some random variation in hair length, which will make the hair appear more realistic. Based on this, adjusting the hair styling will also be more accurate. The top hair clumps might look somewhat monotonous as their shapes are similar. To enhance the variation in styling, you can add a layer of clumps with a curling effect to the hair. By adding a clump modifier, enabling curl, and setting a random value for the curling frequency, you can make the hair more natural with a random curling effect. Now you don't need curling at the roots. You can enable the curve, allowing flexible control of the curling strength variation. The current curling effect is a bit strong, needing to be weakened somewhat. To make the curling effect more random, you can enable the randomization of frequency. Currently, all hair exhibits a curling effect, which looks unnatural, so you can adjust threshold. Set it to a higher value, such as 0.7 or 0.8, adding the curling effect to some hair. The curling effect is still not obvious. You can appropriately enhance the curling strength. Also, since there are many clumps, it might weaken the curling effect. So you can reduce the number of clumps in the curling area, making the curling effect more obvious, and the hairstyling will also be more distinct. Here you can change clump type to point. Then you can set the number of clumps. The number of clumps can be set lower, so the clumps will be larger, and the curling will be more obvious. After that, you can enable threshold to check the hair. After adding this layer of curling effect, you can render to see the effect. By observing, you will find that the clump variation is now much richer. You can observe the effect from multiple views. To further enhance the detail of hairstyling, you can add a noise modifier, making the hair more random. To better observe the hair's randomness effect, you can first increase the hair radius a bit, making it easier to observe, especially thickening the hair tips. When adjusting the randomness effect, you will also need endpoint, because when endpoint is enabled, the hair will be fluffier, which is also the desired effect. After adjusting endpoint, you can then adjust threshold, because not all hair needs a randomness effect. You can appropriately increase threshold to control the randomness. Then you can compare and check the effect. Next, you can continue adjusting. And then you can render to see the effect. Observing the effect, you'll find the randomness effect is somewhat strong, appearing rather abrupt, which needs to be modified. After adding noise, you can observe the effect again and find the top hair contour appears too straight. The hair form is too uniform. Now you can enable parting, making the hair styling more natural and rich. Also, since other modifiers might affect the top contour, they need to be modified. You can adjust the weight, removing the weight of the top area, only retaining the weight on the sides. You can enable the modifiers to check the hair. When modifying the hair styling, you might find the overall effect is still somewhat imperfect. At this time, you need to further enhance the hair direction, making the hair length and clumping effect richer. The process is the same as before. First, select the hair area needing adjustment. Quickly create clumps using the attract brush. And finally use the comb brush to comb the curvature, making the hair appear more natural and better blending with the surrounding hair. When creating clumps, be mindful not to adjust only in one view. You need to divide the clumps, avoiding being too gathered. This way, the hair will appear richer, not looking monotonous. Meanwhile, you also need to adjust areas where the top hair is not gathered enough, making the clump distribution more even. During production, you need to modify it from multiple views. Next, you can check the hair's children and render to observe it. At the same time, you can check the hair in the front view, finding there are some issues with the edge hair in the front view. You can thicken the hair a bit, making it easier to find problems. The hair on the sides is too fluffy. You can check whether it's a noise issue or a direction issue. By observing, the direction is a bit too fluffy, which needs to be flatter. Meanwhile, you can also shorten the hair a bit. Some too fluffy hair needs to be flatter. After that, you can enable the modifiers to see the effect. The left side hair is a bit short, which needs to be lengthened a bit. then you can enable the modifiers to see the effect. You can enable the noise modifier to see if there are still issues. By observing, you'll find the noise is still a bit strong. Here, you can create a new vertex group for the noise modifier, reducing the noise area a bit. You can assign the newly created vertex group to the noise modifier, then modify it. Keep it in the middle top area. This way, the effect can blend better. After processing, you can enable the modifiers to check the hair. For a more visual effect, you can render to see the result. By rendering, you'll find the randomness effect on the hair edges is still somewhat strong, which needs to be further modified. For more precise weight modification, you can enable the hair. When processing weight, it's not necessary to completely remove it. You can retain certain weight variations, making the hair appear richer and more natural. Once adjusted, you can enable the hair modifiers to see the effect. After basic hairstyling adjustment, you need to handle the edge transition. You can find the hair edge transition is rather harsh in rendered mode. Now you can improve the transition by adjusting the hair thickness. Before using weight control for hair thickness, you need to switch to Cycle's hair render engine for normal display. And you can assign a vertex group to the hair radius, weakening the edge hair weight. So the edge hair will exhibit a gradient thickness, making the edge hair naturally connect with the model. After that, you can render to see the effect. By observing up close, you'll find the overall hair is somewhat thick. You can further reduce the hair root thickness. After handling the transition of hair on both sides of the head, you can adjust the hair transition in the front view. You may find the hair root is thick, lacking transition with the model. You can layer the hair near the front of the head separately. First, add weight to that area. You can duplicate the weight that controls density, allowing faster creation of new weights. Next, you can copy out a new layer of hair based on the first layer of hair. As an independent hair group, here the error doesn't matter. You need to click the button below to make the hair modifier independent. Otherwise, adjusting parameters will affect both layers of hair. Assign a vertex group to the newly added hair. Reduce the number of hairs, then observe the hair styling from multiple views. You'll find the styling lacks detail. You can check the current modifiers and delete unnecessary ones. By observing, you'll find the hair styling is somewhat flat. You need to enhance the clumping effect a bit. When adjusting styling, you need to check from multiple views to ensure the effect looks correct from most angles. The forehead styling appears monotonous. You can add a curling effect to the forehead hair, enhancing layers and variation. After that, continue creating hair transitions. To make the hair transition with the model more natural, we need to enable U-shape curve. By default, when the curve is enabled, the hair might appear thicker. At this time, you can copy the value of root radius, setting the curve's y-axis to the same value. This way, the hair thickness will display correctly. You can render or enter the material preview mode to see the effect. If a more natural transition is needed, just set the thickness near the root to 0, making the hair root transition more natural. You can compare the different hair effects. Next, you can enable all hair to see the overall effect. In rendered mode, you'll find the rear top hair lacks curling effect. You can find which modifier controls the hair at the back of the head, then modify this modifier. And you can appropriately adjust the parameters of curl, but not too large to avoid ruining the hair direction. After that, you can add material to the hair for final adjustment. Note, when turning on U-shape curve for hair thickness, the hair may not display in the view. In such case, that you need to temporarily turn off U-shape curve, add material to the hair, then re-enable it. If you find the hair is sparse, you can increase the number. By rendering, you'll find the edge hair is too thin, which needs to be thicker. The thickness of edge hair is controlled by weight, so you need to strengthen the edge weight. Before modifying weight, you can enable the hair, making weight modification more precise. After that, you can observe where else needs hair modification. The quantity of hair at the temples is insufficient. You need to add more. And to better handle the edge hair, you can first mark the edge area with a distinct color, then adjust the hair quantity and direction. You can switch to a more obvious color. Then add hair. The length of edge hair needs to be adjusted appropriately. After adjusting the hair direction and thickness, you can enable all modifiers to see the overall effect. Render to see the effect. The hair clumps at the back of the head are too few, appearing rather rough. You need to increase the number of guides. Quickly add more hair with the density brush. then you can enable the hair modifiers to render and view the effect. After rendering, you'll find the hair at the back of the head doesn't blend well. You need to modify the fluffiness of the hair, as well as the length of the hair. To not affect other areas of hair, you can first select the hair needing processing. You may find the length is also somewhat uneven. You can first modify the hair length. Make the length of this part more even. Too short hair can be lengthened a bit. Long hair can be shortened a bit. After modifying the length, the effect still doesn't blend. You can further modify the hair's fluffiness. Then you can render to see the effect. You'll find the hair length on both sides of the head transitions poorly. You need to even out the length a bit. After adjustment, you can enable the hair modifier to render and see the effect. By rendering, you'll find the hair on the middle head is quite sparse. You can add another layer of hair to supplement the sparse hair. This layer of hair needs to be made shorter, but you don't need to manually modify the hair length. You can add a length modifier for modification. You can set a smaller scale, thus the hair will be shorter. The function of this short hair layer is to supplement the sparse hair, so the hair shouldn't be too short. Next, you can add another noise modifier, making the hair fluffier. Fluffy hair will appear more plentiful. Thus, the hair quantity can be smaller, reducing the project size. This short hair layer doesn't need to cover the entire head, only the areas on the top where the hair is sparse. You can modify based on the density weight, duplicating an existing one. After painting the weight, you can assign it to the length modifier. Next, you can enable all hair to render and check the effect. Once the side view is completed, you can look at the front view. By rendering, you'll find the clumping at the hair root is somewhat strong, not blending well with the model, which needs to be weakened. Currently the styling is fine, but there are still areas that can be further optimized and adjusted. Here we are just providing an idea to help everyone become more familiar with 3D hairbrush when creating hairstyles. Currently, we'll stop the hairstyling here. Goodbye.